35 words on fire. As before, it wasn't difficult to leave the country, and with Lucas and me walking about in boots that left Cossack prints, I wasn't worried about being followed. We removed the oversized boots for our own shoes to cross the rope over the Niemen River. Otherwise, I don't know how I'd have kept my feet wrapped on the rope line. These are heavy boots, Lucas said as he crossed. He tied the boots together and slung them over his neck, and it seemed they were cutting off his air, not his wisest move. I wasn't doing much better. My boots were slung over one shoulder, making it hard to lift that arm every time I needed to slide along the rope. Not my wisest move either. Or, I supposed, when one was crossing on an icy rope over a cold river to avoid soldiers who were prepared to shoot on sight, wisdom and foolishness lost all usual meanings. Fortunately, we did cross it, resting for a while on the opposite bank while I massaged my shoulder and Lucas simply breathed. As soon as we saw the shadows of soldiers beginning to patrol across the river, it was time to walk on. We reached Tilsit shortly after dawn, and I thought, and though I looked forward to sleeping, I was also eager to see the printer again and put in the order for books. To our surprise, he merely glanced at the titles and said, "You carriers are providing me a fine living. Are you sure this is all you want for today?" I smiled at him. "Lower your prices and we'll order more titles." He chuckled. "Maybe I'll raise my prices. Where else will you go for books?" He laughed at himself and said, "I am a fair man and my prices are generous because I wish to see Russia as far from my doorstep as possible. It would be worth it to me to never earn another ruble again if those soldiers were gone. But I warn you, some of those titles will make the Czar angrier with you than usual." Lucas smiled. "I hope so. When will these books be ready?" The printer looked over his list again. "I'll need a week. That should give you time to figure out how you're going to bring all these books back with you." "Where should we stay in the meantime?" I wondered aloud. "That reminds me," the printer said. "I have a note for you." He passed a paper over to me, something that might have seemed a small thing for anyone else, but I received it with a swell of pride. Only a few months ago I wouldn't have been able to read the paper, but he'd given it to me assuming I could read it, and now I could. I unfolded it and immediately said to Lucas, "It's from Milda. How did she—" "She gave me that only yesterday when she came in with a book order of her own," the printer said. Summarizing the note, I said, "Ben sent her over here, too, only she intends to stay. She found a little place to live a few streets away from here and has asked us to come." That was a relief, especially since I hadn't had a decent bite to eat in days, and we both knew that Milda was sure to have food ready for us. When we arrived, she was just pulling out some potato pancakes, as if she'd been expecting us. I never did understand Milda's instincts for knowing when guests were coming to eat, but her timing was almost always perfect. "After you've finished, I'll show you around," Milda said. "I've only arrived 2 days ago myself, so I've hardly had time to settle in, but this place was available immediately, so I took it. Perhaps you've already noticed the extra coffins in the back room." Lucas's head popped up, and our ears, oh, Lucas's head popped up and our eyes met, not sure whether to be amused or horrified. He said, "Milda, is this a undertaker's home?" Or it was, before the undertaker himself died. There was no one to take over his business. A shiver crawled up my spine. "Is he still here? His body or his soul?" Milda asked the question like either possibility could be true. But before I could reply, she said, "He had a proper burial, so let's hope his soul went with him. The other coffins are empty. Don't worry, I checked." Of course she did. She continued to describe the home to us, saying, "I'd like to convert the parlor into some sort of shop. I'll begin by selling off those extra coffins. Everyone needs one eventually. Or I could remake them into beds, do you suppose?" She puttered about, telling us her plans to expand the little home and make it a place of rest for smugglers before their deaths and not after, she was careful to point out, and to use the shop to raise funds to purchase more books for the Lithuanians who could not afford them. But my mind was already elsewhere on how to get all the books we had ordered back into the country. We had twice the number of books to carry as we'd brought across the border before, and the river water was so icy cold by now. I dreaded having to cross that way. There had to be an answer. And when Milda pulled out the ingredients to bake bread, I remembered the second issue on my mind. I reached into the shoulder bag for my father's journal and opened it to the last page of notes he'd made, the page with the recipe. I said, "Milda, do you think you could help me get a few things?" She glanced up midway through, sifting a cup of flour. "Such as?" "Two of them are the same cooking items you have there, sugar and baking soda. And I need some cotton fabric if you could spare any. The final item is harder. Saltpeter." Milda arched up a brow. "Saltpeter? Surely some of the farmers in the area will have it, maybe if we ask nicely." "Saltpeter?" she repeated, more suspicious than before. "What are you making?" My father's final trick before he was arrested. Milda, if this works, it could save our lives one day. Well, I'm in favor of that, Milda sighed. All right, then I will find you some saltpeter. It took her 3 days, but finally she located a farmer who made saltpeter from his cow's manure and sold it as a powder to blacksmiths for creating gunpowder. Gunpowder. Milda clearly hadn't known that was the use for saltpeter when I first asked her for it. She held the bag of it close to her chest and looked down at me. Promise me that you aren't making gunpowder. No weapons. What I'm making isn't a weapon, I promise you. It shouldn't harm anyone. She caught my word choice. Shouldn't? I held out my hands for the saltpeter. Please trust me, Milda. With a sigh, she gave me the bag, but said, If my new home explodes because of this, I will be angry with you, Audra. It won't explode, Lucas assured her. Then, when her back was turned, he whispered to me, Will it explode? I shrugged. I genuinely hoped not, but hope was all I had. We waited until Milda had gone to bed for the night and then cooked the ingredients on her stovetop. It resembled a soft dough when it was ready, and we rolled the dough into a tube shape inside some of Milda's cotton fabric, and then poked a little stick inside the center of it. By morning, when everything was dry, we pulled out the stick and inserted the laces from the soldiers' boots that we had stolen, to use as a fuse, cut the tube into pieces, and then wrapped everything up tight with Milda's extra stockings, though we didn't intend to tell her about that. She wouldn't be happy about the sacrifice of her stockings. Only 4, Lucas mumbled. Do you think that will be enough? There's no way to find out, I said. Honestly, I wish we had more, but until we know if they work, I suppose it doesn't matter. We'll just have to put them to good use and pray they work when we light them. They they've got to work, Lucas said with a smile. But for now, they are the 4 most beautiful smoke bombs I've ever seen. I think they're the only smoke bombs you've ever seen. With a smile, I handed him half the pile. 2 for you and 2 for me. May we use them well. He drew in a deep breath. I don't see how these will help us get across the border. My grin widened. Those aren't for the border. I have a different plan for that. End of chapter 35.